Welcome to the MVP Show. Our guest today is Mario Gomez. Has an awesome background in Dynamics GP, although is starting to pivot more into the Power Platform, Power Apps, and Flow. Full show notes for this episode can be found at nz365guide.com/113. Now let's get on with the show. Mariano, welcome to the MVP Show.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me today. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to get you on air and have a conversation, as in we've kind of moved in different circles. I see you've been an MVP, coming up 12 years now?
Yes, sir. With the powers to be, I will certainly hit that mark. Hopefully, July 1st is a good news day for me.
Yeah. So to our listeners, we're recording on the 27th of June, which means July 1st is kind of D-Day for us all, whether we get renewed or not. And so there's a bit of kind of like, am I through? Nobody knows that you basically wait for an email to hit your inbox on that morning sent around Seattle, 9 a.m. Seattle time, I think it is. And of course, we know whether we're in or out for another year.
Yeah, Mark, I can tell you one thing, though. After being an MVP for such a long time, I have learned not to stress myself about it. I think part of what we do is we do this without any expectations of paid back. And I certainly have come to just, do my community work, do it without any expectations. And hopefully at the end of the day, it pays off. And it's been doing that for me, at least for the past 11 years. So one more wouldn't hurt, but, I have no expectations of any kind.
So true, so true. So tell us a bit about where you live in the world.
Well, I hail from Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. I've been living here in Atlanta for the past 12 years of my life. And prior to that, I used to live in the sunny South Florida, down in in the Miami area. So we moved here after a set of business opportunities that my wife got, and now we are, I guess, considered locals, right?
Okay. So tell us a bit about then family. What's your family? Kind of what do you get up to when you're not doing work?
Well, interestingly enough, I have we have five kids. 3 of them are from my previous marriage, but we have in total 5, and 4 of them are now adults, literally, and they have their own lives pretty much. So we only have a 13-year-old here at home who's in 8th grade, and we are basically busy with him day in and day out. If you have teenagers, you kind of know how that goes. So we love just the state of our lives right now, given the fact that we're young parents still. At least I consider myself to be young at 47. And we just try to make it work for us and for him at this point.
Yeah, you're a spring chicken. You're not even at halftime, right? 50 years is now halftime.
Yeah, there you go. I'm still. It still weighs in my mind, I guess.
No, I reckon life expectancy for us will easily hit 100 based on if we just take the trend pattern of the last 100, 200 years.
That is
correct. We should live to be 100. So, we're only coming up on halftime.
Yes, sir. And I'm looking forward to it. I think the next, 10, 15 years of my life will certainly bring some more interesting stuff. Hopefully a lot of it involving the community, but also personally. I just expect to continue growing from a personal level and a professional level, even, at that age. If we still have the life expectancy trends that you just outlined.
Yeah. So true. So tell us, how did you become an MVP 12 years ago?
Well, that's an interesting story. And I don't know if you are familiar with the global economic depression that we had back in '08.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah,
What is it? What there was a name for it. What was it called? There was a term for it. I
Yeah,
can't even think what it was.
I
Yeah.
think it was the Great Depression, right?
The Great Depression was back in
Back in the
the
30s, I think.
30s,
Yeah.
but it was called what? There was a term for it, and it's at the top of my
The
tongue. What
Great
was it?
Recession. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it
Yes,
was a
that was the Great
recession, definitely.
Recession. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, bottom line, we had just moved to Georgia, if you can picture that, with my wife, and we were both working for the same employer. So, if you can relate that to any term, that would be having all your eggs in one basket,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. I know what you mean.
So, given the fact that the economy turned south, we sort of like were both unemployed at the time, and we're pretty disciplined or are pretty disciplined financially. We've always been. So we had a chance to, you know, keep our savings going, and that basically run us through the entire period until we sort of um, got back on our feet. But to make things very, um, I guess, very interesting at the time, I actually found myself kind of hitting that mental roadblock against what was going on, and it turned out that I turned to the community and started just answering questions online. And back then, were the forums, if you remember, we had these very primitive forums, not the kind of platforms that we have today.
Exactly.
And over a period of time, I would say over a period of 3 months, I got contacted by Microsoft and they said, "Hey, we like what you're doing out there with the community. Would you submit yourself to being an MVP?" So, back then we could do that. I actually filled out the paperwork that was necessary, answered the questions that were necessary, garnered the support of back then 2 or 3 MVPs, because we didn't have more than 2 or 3 MVPs in the GP community. And and uh, next thing you know, I was an MVP in July, coincidentally enough. So, from a bad situation, I think I turned it into a positive thing, just outpouring myself to the community and keeping my mind going, taking my mind a little bit off the situation that we were living at the time, and made the best of it. And here I am.
So good, so good. Okay, so you came in from the GP or Great Plains part of the world. Was it still called Great Plains then, or it had been updated to Dynamics GP?
Back then, it was still Microsoft Dynamics GP, so we haven't changed that much overall. So it's been quite the ride, I guess.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So interesting. I want to kind of unpack a bit around, the journey that GP as a product has had. But before we go there, is that still your primary focus now, or have you started moving more into the Power Apps Flow part of the world?
Yes, I actually think I pioneered a few of the first sessions around how to interact your enterprise resource planning system with, or your on-premise enterprise resource planning system with the Power Platform. So I think I delivered some of the few first sessions around that. But yeah, my focus as of late has been more on the Power Platform side. While I still continue to do GP for obvious reasons, here at my employer, we actually do ISV products around Microsoft Dynamics GP. So that's still my focus, but I think personally I'm moving more into the Power Platform roles, and particularly with Power Apps and Flow.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I'm gonna bring that up in a second, but just before we go there, let's talk a bit about GP. So, we've seen a major pivot in the last 2 years from Microsoft, where they got rid of the word ERP, they got rid of the word CRM, and they came out with Dynamics 365. Right. So, really kind of breaking down those internal silos that companies have around their ERP and their, CRM data, if you like. And of course, out of that, we've got the Power Platform, Common Data Service underpinning that. But what I've seen is that, we've seen NAV for Microsoft, one of the other ERP products, pivot into becoming Business Central. And we have seen the AX side of things become F&O under Dynamics 365. I haven't seen anything around GP, SL for that matter, or Solomon SL. And what's going on? What do you think Microsoft's doing with these two product lines, and especially GP?
Yes, the focus on the on-prem or what they now call legacy systems has been obviously, declining over the past, I would say, 4 or 5 years now. And given the fact that Nav and AX were very internationalized products that supported many different business scenarios, um, garnish more of the attention of Microsoft and focus to bring those products on into the cloud, which is now what we call Dynamics 365 for finance and operations, and certainly Dynamics 365 Business Central. So respectively. So I believe that yes, there will continue to be a decline on focus and in new functionality for SL and GP, but then you have to ask yourself honestly, these are products that have been in the market for over 25 to 30 years now. What much more can they add functionality wise to these on-prem products? Um, so they're very mature. They're very mature products as it is, and that's one thing that customers need to understand. Particularly moving from Dynamics GP and SL to any of these other products that are cloud-based products is not a straightforward upgrade. I want to make sure that our audience understands that. Um, there is a lot of functionality that is complemented in Microsoft Dynamics GP in particular by ISV products that you cannot get when you move to the cloud. Okay, so to sell Business Central or Finance and Operations as a straight upgrade from your legacy systems or what we call the on-prem systems, it's a misconception. And I always caution customers to do their homework with the help of their partners because I found customers that typically try to make that leap, and what they end up doing really is moving to non-Microsoft products because um, they are disillusioned from the results of those type of migrations. So
Okay, so is the product they're moving to NetSuite mainly?
no, actually, interestingly enough, most customers who are on the GP platform are looking at Acumatica, which is a big Microsoft competitor in that space. NetSuite to a lesser degree, but you got to keep in mind that most of the GP customers, GP is one of those weird products in a sense because the strength of GP is really not necessarily in the core of the product itself. It's in the variety of ISV solutions that you can attach to it and the architecture that those solutions have brought to life and the way we integrate with the core application that makes it so interesting for customers. It's a compelling story. Yep. So I just want to make sure that that is out there because I don't want to portray any of these cloud solutions as an option for a straight integration or migration, as most Microsoft salespeople will want you to believe.
Yeah, yeah. So if we're thinking about that, right, I see kind of if I look at okay, so I've got GP in. Let's say I've had it in for 10 years, and I used to always hear a figure in the industry that a company maybe every 7 to 10 years would look at their software in this space. Do you see it as that frequent, or is it even further out, maybe 15 plus years? As in
Um,
that you'd swap out an ERP system?
yeah, that's a very interesting question because most companies that I know and I've worked with, I've been in the consulting business for over 20 years myself. Um, they tend to evaluate the ERP solutions every 7 to 10 years. But one thing you gotta actually look at is when you look at the combined expenditures on your ERP implementations over a period of 7 years, it can add up pretty quick. You know, a lot of it goes into services, but a lot of it is also complementary software to your core ERP product. So is in the GP space is not unheard of that you will find customers that have, you know, the core GP application, but they have 10, 15 ISV products. Okay. And these products allow you to do many things from enhancing the horizontal aspect of your core product, but also introduce a lot of vertical, industry specific solutions that you cannot find today, either on finance and operations and even Business Central. So, that's kind of where you get those deltas that are significant to considering a new ERP solution.
Is GP, as in brand new installs of GP, is that happening still, or is that not happening anymore? Is it, in other words, all the systems in market are under maintenance? They have a lifespan to continue to go through, or are there new implementations being done?
My understanding is, and at least from what we see in being an ISV, is there are still very new implementations happening. They may not necessarily happen at the frequency that you would have expected 10, 15 years ago. But then again, keep in mind that GP has roughly, if you believe the numbers that you can find online, anywhere between 40 to 50,000 customers. It's a huge install base, and for being a middle market solution, it was the most dominant middle market solution in the North American space. Um, we also have pockets of users in Australia, pockets of users in the UK, South America certainly, Central America, Mexico. So there is quite a bit of implementations of GP outside of North America itself. So
If a company was 100% Microsoft shop, in other words, they had Office 365, they'd upgraded that part of their organization. They're running GP. They might have a few workloads running in Azure. And let's say they said, okay, we need to go online, right? Whether it be from a redundancy, a risk perspective. I came from New Zealand originally, and we had an earthquake there some years ago in Christchurch, and a lot of business infrastructure got wiped out. That was kind of on-prem type technology, and kind of brought those businesses to their knees. And so you've got a lot of reasons now why people are going to the cloud, and one can be the risk of a natural event happening. The other one, of course, is the adoption of AI, and how AI is really transforming a lot of business processes. And any company that wants to, if you like, get the competitive advantage going forward, needs to consider how AI fits into their mix. So, what's their pivot? What's their choice if they decide to deprovision on GP and move to another Microsoft technology? What's the logical choice in your mind?
yeah, good question. In fact, one of the trends that I'm seeing out there is customers moving to Business Central, but that migration is basically a very controlled one in the sense that um, Business Central does have at the core financials level perhaps some of the capabilities that you would expect from any financial application, right? So a very strong GL, AP, AR, etc. But when you go to the distribution aspects of it, meaning sales order processing, purchase order processing, inventory control, that's where things start to get a little bit more dicey. And never mind if you have to add things like field services or any vertical solution. So you asked me what is the logical choice. What if I told you that the logical choice would be Microsoft Dynamics GP in the cloud, hosted on infrastructure as a service?
So yeah, IaaS deployment.
Correct. So you do have the capabilities of still using GP in the cloud with its web client. And I know there are a couple companies, hosting companies, that do provide that service based on Azure infrastructure. So it's not unheard of. We have companies in our space that are actually banking their entire revenue model on deploying GP in the cloud.
So what happens then about the AI story? Because IaaS still doesn't necessarily allow you to plug into AI, unless you're going to open up AI and go, sorry, APIs and plug into cognitive services, machine learning, that type of thing in Azure. So are businesses doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. If you actually look at the way SQL Server is architected, you can then now expose SQL Server to any AI capability that Microsoft has. At the end of the day, it's only data going back and forth, right? So you can use things like Azure Data Factory to get your data into some cloud repository where it can be further analyzed and exposed to AI capabilities, whether that's all the cognitive services capabilities or machine learning. You have all those options. Um, but part of the other aspect of that is the deep integration that Microsoft has done between GP and the Business Central Intelligent Cloud Engine. So you can definitely expose that integration via Intelligent Cloud and gain immediate access to all the AI capabilities from that are built into Business Central. Of course, is an attempt as well of gaining the customer base and gaining the attention of the customer base from a migration standpoint. But if you go back to all these things that I've outlined before, functionality being one of the major concerns is not as straightforward as it might seem. You still have quite a bit of differences between the two products.
You know what surprised me is that they even bought out Business Central. As in, I don't know if you're familiar with Project Green, an internal bit of work some years ago to kind of make one ERP to rule them all type thing. And, one of the challenges Microsoft has had is all these disparate ERPs through acquisitions. And so when I see them go to Dynamics 365 and F&O and kind of their cloud offering, sorry, that's my Siri taking off. I expected that, they would stick with one. And then all of a sudden, Business Central comes up, which is obviously a port from NAV by the looks. What do you think? What were they thinking?
So actually, history would have it that Project Green was an attempt about in the early 2000s to consolidate all the ERPs. But I think what Microsoft found back then was the fact that customers did like their ERP solution just as is. So consolidating all that functionality at the time probably seemed a little, uh, you know, premature, given the fact that they didn't quite understand the ERP market. Now, there were obviously all these products have their nuances and their idiosyncrasies built in, so it was a little bit difficult to engage in that project. So moving forward, fast forward in about 10 more years, so we're talking now about 2010. The acquisition craze started, or back, you kind of had passed the acquisition stage, I should say, and now you got into the whole building out the cloud solutions that we saw or we're currently seeing in the market. Started with CRM, now known as Dynamics 365 for sales. Then you had the addition of finance and operations when they converted the full AX application to being a web-based application, and then started to move that into the cloud. Then was the migration of Nav and building out the Nav web client. So sort of that that whole technology transition, I think, is what drove Microsoft to basically abandon the whole model of consolidating the ERPs. But one thing I can tell you though, it is clear in my mind that they will continue to invest in making Business Central the leading middle market solution to basically replace all these legacy systems. That will happen. It will take time, and I don't know how much time Microsoft has allotted to make that happen. and see a success story out of it. But if you can still think about how customers purchase ERP, because you asked me that question before, it's a long cycle. There's a lot of considerations into it, and customers just don't replace ERP the way we think they do. It's a monumental investment of time and money. It's not like installing Excel or or
Totally
Word.
different. Totally different.
Totally different.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so so here's the other one then. Why didn't they build it directly onto CDS as in Business Central, do you think?
Why? Well, I would think that the CDS story has not evolved as fast as I think we would have expected, right? And CDS seemed to be at the time one of those esoteric XRM type platforms. If you kind of go back to the history of where it comes from, and I don't know that converging all this technology onto CDS would have been or has happened as fast as we initially would have anticipated. The point here being right now, if you look at Business Central, Business Central does not really effectively take advantage of CDS fully. Finance and operations and maybe 365 for sales and customer engagement, all these things do take advantage of CDS because it's native to how they were built, right? So uh, it's more of a, I think it's more of a timing issue as opposed to anything that would prevent them from getting there. Um, and I don't know from to be, the I still sit here trying to understand what the CDS story will be. Um, I'm sure you've dabbled more in that space than I do, and you probably have seen the drawbacks and but certainly the improvements that CDS has had over time. But you know, um, I don't know. I don't know where that story is heading. I have to see more of it before I make any so I can make an informed decision around it. But right now, I just don't have the answer for it.
Mariano, it's been great to have you on the show. Can you believe it? We're already coming up on time. I always love to ask a few kind of end questions. My kind of one for you today what's the number one bit of advice that you would give to an aspiring MVP around what they need to do? If they were just thinking, if they heard this podcast and thought, you know what, I could become an MVP, how long do you think they should invest time wise in doing the things that will ultimately get noticed of them ultimately being nominated and becoming an MVP?
All the obvious things aside, I think, and by obvious I mean the forums, the videos, the things that we're doing right now, podcasts, all those obvious things aside, I think one thing that aspiring MVPs need to understand is this is a selfless endeavor. You do these things because you love them, not because you are expecting some reward from it. The only reward that we truly get as MVPs from doing this is to improve the life of other people and make sure that they do not experience the difficulties and the hardships that we have seen. Right? That's why we put all this knowledge and content out there. Um, and certainly the networking aspect is the second thing that I would highlight. So selflessness, networking, to me are at the top of the list of things that aspiring MVPs should be looking at. Go to events, meet people, talk to them, understand their problems, and come up with kick-ass solutions for them.
I love it. I love it. Mariano, it's been awesome to have you on here. I've learned so much today. I had obviously a lot of gaps around the GP area, and it's been great to kind of get your insights to it and around the MVP program. If people want to kind of connect with you online, what do you recommend? Twitter, YouTube, where should they go?
Anywhere. If you, the way I like to put it is, if you can't find me online, there's something wrong with your internet. But certainly on Twitter at DGP Blogster. On Facebook, you can always go to the Dynamics GP Blogster on Facebook, or you can always go to my blog directly, https:// the Dynamics GP Blogster.blogspot.com. Shoot me an email. I'm pretty good at that. Meet me on LinkedIn, wherever you wanna, whatever outlet you wanna really get a hold of me at. Meet me at the conferences. I like to talk to people at conferences, and I'm a regular presenter at many of these user group sessions, and certainly the upcoming user group summit in Orlando, Florida. And why not? I travel around the world as well, doing other stuff, and just pick me up anywhere.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about becoming an MVP, you might want to check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/NZ365guy. I've got a series that I produce a video every Monday with steps that you can take to become an MVP. Full show notes for this show can be found at nz365guy.com/113. See you next week.